Evening and welcome to this special show on Aadhaar. It's indeed a historic day because the world's largest biometric ID database has been constitutionally upheld by a five-judge bench of the Supreme Court. Now, it's not a complete victory though, because even as the Supreme Court bench upheld Aadhaar, it has struck down many sections, and it's also made the nature of Aadhaar more voluntary rather than mandatory. In fact, we caught up with Aadhaar architect Nandan Nilekani in an exclusive interview just a few minutes back. Listen in to what he had to say. We have Nandan Nilekani, the architect of Aadhaar, joining us live and exclusive on ET Now, all the way from the US. We've been troubling him for many hours now, but finally we've managed to secure a line with him. Mr. Nilekani, thank you so much for talking to ET Now on a historic day as this. In a sense, it started all with you the moment you came on board at UIDAI way back in 2009. Take us through your first sense of this verdict, the majority verdict that came out from the Supreme Court today, upholding the constitutional validity of Aadhaar.
I think this is a landmark judgment in favor of Aadhaar. And I think not only the court has, upheld the constitutionality of the act, they have unequivocally validated the founding principles of Aadhaar, which is that it was a unique identity project that was critical to the development goals of the nation, that it was all about inclusion. It was about millions of people who didn't have a proper ID having an ID. And it was very much a resident-centric project. And I think they have upheld that. I'm very grateful for that. And I think they have also made a lot of recommendations, all of which should be looked at. And I think this essentially, through this, almost a decade-long process, I think we have developed a better and stronger Aadhaar together.
Right. Sir, but while a majority of the bench upheld Aadhaar, Justice Chandrachud presented a very strong dissenting view where he raised questions on the way it was passed as a money bill. While I know that rests with the Parliament, he also made some very scathing observations on the Aadhaar program itself. He also questioned the UIDAI's ability, to safeguard citizens' privacy. What would you say to all these concerns? Is this work in progress? Are there many things that still need to be fixed?
I think the judgment is a 4-1 majority judgment, and I think it has upheld the constitutional value of Aadhaar. And as I said in my previous remarks, Aadhaar has gone through 10 years of, a lot of feedback and improvement, and I'm sure they will continue to do that.
Right. Mr. Nilekani, I just want to touch upon, the scope of Aadhaar. Are you a little disappointed with the fact that many sections have been struck down? I mean, they have retained Section 7, which has to do with subsidies. They've also made it mandatory for PAN and IT returns. But many things for which Aadhaar was being sought, be it mobile phones, banks, school admissions, so many other schemes, it's now not mandatory. Net, are you okay with that? Are you disappointed that perhaps the scope of Aadhaar has been limited to a large extent? It's been clipped to a large extent. This is a diluted version of Aadhaar.
Well, I think, first of all, it's a very long judgment and, hundreds, probably 1,000 pages. So we'll have to go through it and study the fine print. But I do believe, my understanding is that if it's voluntary usage, there should be no issue. If I want to use my Aadhaar for a service, I don't see any issue. So I think all this will get sorted out. I mean, fundamentally, I think it's a landmark victory for the Aadhaar case. It's been constitutionally upheld. The Aadhaar Act has been upheld. Everything. I think it's a great moment, and we should look at that.
Right. No, I'm sure it's a tactical victory because ultimately it's not been scrapped, it's been constitutionally upheld. But I'll just ask you one more point here, which is Section 57. This is something a lot of startups, private companies were looking forward to. That has been read down, Section 57, which has to do with private entities gaining access to Aadhaar. The court said that that is unconstitutional. But others say that there is a provision wherein if it's backed by law, private companies can still access it. How would you read the Section 57 in particular, sir?
Over the days, a lot of clarity. Any use of Aadhaar for benefit of a billion people will be possible.
What do you think is the way forward from now? Because the government has, the court has said that the government must push forward with a data protection law right away. Do you believe that needs to be done? Is there political will considering elections are still a few months away?
Well, I don't know about the job in putting together a draft. I do hope it will get passed as soon as possible.
Right. And Mr. Nilekani, in a sense, do you feel vindicated today? Because the last few years, there's been a lot of criticism on Aadhaar. There have been particularly some strident criticism coming from activists on its scope, on security, on exclusion. Do you feel vindicated today as someone who, architected this project? I mean, I think this is an even bigger legacy for you than Infosys. In that sense, do you feel vindicated today, sir?
Well, I think, right from day one, the Aadhaar project was a vision of inclusion. It was about giving millions of people who didn't have an identity some way to have an ID access services. So it was a very inclusive vision with a lot of passionate and dedicated, idealistic people. And I think that the fact is, I think the Supreme Court has upheld that vision, and we are grateful to the court for their sagacity.
Right. Finally, sir, do you think there should be more done in terms of, a regulatory structure for the UIDAI? This is something that we asked Justice Sri Krishna as well. It was recommended in the Sri Krishna Committee report that there needs to be a regulatory structure as far as the UIDAI is concerned. It can't be the judge, jury, and executioner. Do you think there should have been more clarity on this, or, is this an evolving process? We will see more on this.
No, I think that question is linked to the data privacy law, because the data privacy law in turn will create the architecture for the data protection authority, and that data protection authority, will be sort of the overall oversee the data protection and other issues. So I think it's all, you have to think of this as part of the infrastructure of privacy that is getting created in India today.
Right. Mr. Nilekani, last question to you, sir. In the last year or two, you've also been pushing the idea of India Stack, wherein the platform of Aadhaar can be leveraged for a number of use cases, be it eKYC, e-sign, and others. But with today's judgment, particularly the one on Section 57, do you think it will be a longer process for that to happen, that perhaps the pace of adoption, whether it comes to fintech, whether it comes to private sector, is going to take longer than expected? There will be a lot of pain points there.
Well, as I said, we have to see the fine print, and it's really premature for me to comment on that. I think it's entirely, we just have to get into more details, and I'll leave that discussion for another day. Okay? Thank you, Chandra.